Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. This is a little bit of a follow-up video from my previous, which I did not expect to be so well received, but I'm super happy I was able to air some of my grievances with the survivor side of DBD and have others relate so well. Now, there were a couple of comments talking about how much of an entitled survivor main I am and how I've never played killer, which isn't really true, so I just laughed it off, but because of how frustrated I've been with survivor, I decided to actually grind killer to Eerie and just see how difficult it really was. Except it really wasn't. I know a lot of people might say, oh, well, you're just slow MMR, but the majority of my games I was getting 2 to 4k, which increases MMR, and even then, I don't think MMR is that much of a factor anymore. My matches were all over the place. I had some players that were at a couple hundred hours, some with thousands of hours. I had over prestige 50 players running into walls. I had some really good coordinated players. I had groups with Sabo breakout or flashlights. I had people that pre-dropped every pallet, so yeah. It seems like after a certain amount of matches, players just get pulled together anyways. Regardless, a lot of the comments that I saw complaining were just genuinely skill issues on their part. And with that being said, I compiled a good portion of comments that express some of the common killer struggles, and how I deal with some of them, and what I've noticed about most killers overall. So here we go. Number 1, camping and tunneling are just legitimate strats. Oftentimes, I hear people say, okay, well this is just the easiest way to play, and yeah, of course it is, but do you ever even try in the beginning? A lot of killers don't try to play to get better, they play for comfort and practically a no resistance win, and then they lock themselves into camping and tunneling instead of actually learning. I think it's a normal mentality to want to win, I mean, it's only natural, but I don't understand how you actually think you're going to get better at any killer if you play them all the exact same way, despite them having unique powers. Again, you could play for comfort, but it's better to have the skill to back it up in situations where it just doesn't work. It's just kinda scummy, because there are two separate sides to this game, and I don't think either side should ruin it for one another. It's a game, meant for fun. And I'd understand if the killer was gonna go after somebody who just got unhooked because they were body blocking, or even alternatively somebody that was looping around the hook. That's not really them camping, or even at endgame, but as you can see here, this guy was just hanging out, just because. Number 2. M1, no anti-loop, and no mobility killers are weak. I've heard this argument so many times, and yes, it has some truth, but this is when you have to adapt to playing the killer and finding perks that synergize with their power and specifically, your gameplay. Perks are meant to enhance your gameplay, not necessarily make or break it, and I've noticed a lot of killers who do run multiple gen slows are often terrible at chase, because they use slowdowns to stall and hope for the best, to kind of make up for their skill. Personally, for my M1 killers, I'll run Stabiffle, also known as Save the Best for Last, and if I decide to run slows, I never run multiple slows aside from Jolt and Pain Res. Jolt for controlling gens nearby when I get downs, and Pain Res for those that are further progressed. I personally don't like kicking gens either, so this incentivizes me to have good chases, meaning if I can end them quicker, I can generate more pressure naturally. I also find certain perks work better on killers like I'm All Ears for Pyramid Head or Huntress, and Dissolution on Clown or Spirit. Number 3, killers don't accept criticism well. It's okay to not be great at everything you do in DBD. Personally, it took me around 2,000 hours to even be decent at Survivor on my own, and around 500 or so on Killer. Dead by Daylight isn't the type of game that you boot up, play a few games, then automatically become good. There's a lot of perks, maps, RNG, powers, items, add-ons, and just so much more that occurs naturally in gameplay. It's not something that you learn in a week or even a month, and people don't accept that. I've noticed people would much rather blame everything except for themselves. And while this actually applies to both sides, it's more relevant on Killer because they decide the flow and dictate the match itself. For example, a lot of people think that kicking pallets is a waste of time, but sometimes a loop could be rendered useless if you just kick the pallet instead of trying to play around it. I legitimately watched somebody stream where they tried to chase around a pallet when the survivor was facing an edge wall for almost a minute. If they would have just kicked the pallet, the survivor's against the edge wall. They'd have nowhere to go, and they could have ended the chase then and there. But instead, they got frustrated at the survivor, thinking it was their fault, but it was actually theirs. There's plenty of other instances, but that's just one. Number 4, killers get greedy. Since 6.1, a lot of people, including myself obviously, would say that killer is easier than before. Not that you don't have to do anything and win, but you can play in the cheapest way possible, and there's nothing that a survivor can really do to win against it. If I wanted to push for a 4K each game by not caring, I could probably do it in about 90% of my matches. But I've noticed a lot of killer players are ultra greedy in their matches, where even if they have a good amount of hooks or even a 2 or 3K, they have to have the 4K. Sort of like a, a 4K or I'm not okay mentality, which is bizarre. I understand DBD as an ASIM, and so thinking that I'm always gonna have a 4K or that I always deserve a 4K is something that I just can't get past. It's basically an admission that you think that there's nobody that could be better than you. And although it started as a joke, I've noticed a trend of people that have this sort of killer power role fantasy where they want a completely uncontested, full sweep, no resistance type of thing, no matter what, or else it just doesn't matter to them. Number 5, survivors have perks to counter a lot. This one is kind of intertwined with the first, but perks that survivors have to counter some of the more unfun killer plays can't always apply, which makes it a little frustrating. Because of how oppressive killer can be, you can't really outskill the oppressiveness. You can just kind of hope it works, and I'll explain what I mean. I'll release an infographic on Twitter recently that gives us an idea of what I'm talking about. But the infographic made me feel a little weird because of the shoehorning into a build when there are so many other perks and opportunities. But a lot of survivors are just at the mercy of a killer not playing a certain way, which I don't really like. And even using some of those perks, I've still been straight up camped and tunneled with these. I just think the focus should be more advocating for killers to get better and let people actually play games out. I don't think I made that as clear on Twitter, which I'm aware of, but Ots and I are friendly peers to one another as content creators, even if we do have different trains of thoughts. Number 6, the Survivor HUD is too OP. I've been seeing a lot of people reference that the Survivor HUD is too OP already, but not even for solo queue survivors, for Swift too. I have major confusion here as to how it's OP considering it just tells you very general information. Not even the exact totem that's being cleansed or the gen that's being worked on, just straight general knowledge. This makes it so that solo queue players aren't completely left in the dark and have a pressure to play more as a team, which I'm super happy to see. We haven't even seen stats come out on whether or not this has increased the escape rate, which I'm sure is still pretty much the same considering how strong Killer is at the moment. Number 7, SWF is scary. This is a smaller point, but I feel like there's far too much fear-mongering when it comes to SWF and DBD, and it's kinda silly at this point. SWF is usually just a group of friends goofing off who don't want to play alone. Hell, I'm one of those kinds of people. I'm not here calling my position every 10 minutes or trying to destroy the killer. It's usually dumb stuff like this.
Australia, right?
In Australia.
She was telling me how her mom, at her place of employment, because she works in an office, and they have this spider that they call Charlie, and he's just there.
That was such good timing. Huh? What? I've been accused of SWF just because of pure coordination between randoms and I in my matches, but that's the one true scary part, coordinated players who aren't always in a SWF. After a certain amount of time, you'll be confident in your matches as a survivor, so yeah, you'll take a protection hit, you'll red light a killer, and you'll go for more risky plays. That just happens. Scott John made a really good video about this, which I'll link down below in the description, but I won't keep going on and on about it. He does a really great job of explaining. Number 8, gens go too quick. One thing that always freaks killers out is when they see 1 to 2 gens pop off early on, which is natural because you think to yourself, oh shoot, they're really hammering gens, but that's not always the case. Survivors spawn near gens or spawn together at gens, which I think is bad RNG and shouldn't happen, but it does. Killers are simply the weakest at the start, but it's really mid to end game that is the most important in my opinion. Meanwhile, survivors are the strongest at the start of a match. That's just how games are designed to go. However, your goal at the start of a match should be to strip survivors of the resources and make them weaker as the match progresses. Number 9, killers overcommit or undercommit to chases. Chases are a huge thrill for survivors like me, but because I have thousands of hours, my experience combined with a good setup can let me loop for however long the killer decides to chase me at times. This could be for 2 to 3 or even 5 gens. I primarily play solo queue, so I can't always say the same for my teammates, but I have had some teammates out there that are just as strong at looping the killer. But realistically, far too many killers overcommit to their chases, costing them their gens, and they're not wasting enough resources as well. This ties into what I previously said, of course, but I can typically greed loops because I know what I can get away with versus what I can't get away with. A lot of survivors won't have this knowledge, so they will pre-drop and they will waste pallets instantly. Chasing these types of survivors early on, even if it doesn't result in a down, can be beneficial because you strip the survivors of their resources and the next survivor you chase can't use them and then you'll have a much easier time as a result. Even catching a survivor out of positioning can be really good too. On the flip side, you can also undercommit to chases and prematurely leave them without injuring, downing, and even wasting any of their resources, which is also a big no. But as time goes on, you'll find a good balance of these things. Number 10. If killers can't stack gen perks, neither should survivors. This one will also be short and to the point, but a lot of killers will complain about survivors being able to do gens really quickly, but Realistically, these are in very niche scenarios and can't even be applied to most of their matches. And again, tying with my previous point, a lot of killers will overcommit to a chase and not even realize that they've been chasing for that long. For example, this guy complaining in my YouTube comments. There is no reason in the world why you should be chasing a survivor for more than an actual minute. I mean, most of my chases end within 30 to 45 seconds. Anyways, I know a lot of people freaked out when Hyperfocus and Stakeout sparked up some conversations on Twitter, but the setup for it requiring you to be in the killer's terror radius for a full minute without being chased, not being interrupted by any means, and hitting most if not all skill checks is a lot to pull off consistently, and there's an entire build that's dedicated to it, typically. So this means that more than likely you won't have to worry about being hit with DS, off the record, reassurance, if you want to get those people out of your game ASAP. Long story short, there's just nothing that survivors have in comparison outside of extremely niche gameplay that can progress gens as fast as killers can regress them. And here you can see this nemesis just does not stop chasing my friend Zero, and he's let all 5 gens get done, and Zero gets out, and then he DCs. But look at his build. He was hoping that he could chase for long enough and have the slows do the work. Number 11. Killers have massive egos. A lot of killers really do. I've noticed a lot of killers get mad when they suspect SWF, get teabagged, get stunned with head-on, get flashlight saved, get looped, and more. It makes a lot of people flustered, and as a result, I've seen a lot of people make more mistakes than they normally would. Certain things like getting head-on or flashlight saved aren't making you lose your games. It's you getting outplayed from time to time, and that is okay. Once you know about head-on in your match, you can be wary of it next time. You can look around, face a wall, or run Infectious or Franklin's if you're worried about flashlights. Even with things like survivors gesturing, nodding, or teabagging, the action does nothing to progress the game for them. It actually slows them down instead. I used to get upset at it when I first played Killer 2, but then I realized it was only making me play worse because of how upset I was letting it make me. Even as a survivor, I love nodding purely because it looks so goofy from the killer's POV and it makes me laugh. Or sometimes I'll point to tell the killer to stop chasing me, just because. It's not that serious.
ボディチェックを受けた時にちょっと借りてきたんです。ボディチェックを受けた時にちょっと借りてきたんです。
I got you, Miss Claudette!
こんなものが存在していたとは。